I'm gonna piss off a lot of Fate fans with this what if. Anyways, I'm Law, and today I'm making a what if Tatsumi was Archer's reincarnation from the Fate series. Anyways, let's begin. So this is how the war ends, Archer thought to himself as he was being consumed by the Holy Grail after having lost his fight against Gilgamesh, being too injured to move as he sank deeper and deeper into the Holy Grail, feeling the immense powerful mana that was flowing around his body as he was slowly dying of blood loss. Hmm. After trying to kill Shiro Emiya, and even after that, when I tried to stop Gilgamesh, I failed, and now I'm going to die, having to continue killing more and more people for all eternity, Archer thought to himself. Archer then suddenly had a flashback of his time with Rin telling his younger self that he should have lived more selfishly with his life and actually pursued things that he wanted, which then led to his dates with both Rin and Saber. If he was being honest with himself, he would say that was one of the happiest memories of his life. If only I could start over. If only I could have enjoyed my life more. If only I realized sooner that being a hero of justice, living in a world where everyone was saved, was nothing more than an impossible dream, then I wouldn't have had to live a miserable existence as a counter guardian, constantly cleaning humanity's mistakes for all eternity. I wish this would all just end. Archer closed his eyes, as he was now dead, but before he could disappear, the mana and residue of the Holy Grail was somehow able to affect his soul, and was also able to hear his call of wanting to start over. Then suddenly, the Grail exploded, destroying everything in its path that could stretch for miles and miles until the Earth was destroyed. A pair of eyes started to open slowly, which were blinking twice, and was the eyes belonging to that of a baby, which saw an old tall man with a white beard and brown eyes smiling at him. Now who would leave such an adorable baby by my doorstep? The old man said softly as he was carrying the baby. The old man then decided to take the baby in as his guardian, realizing the baby was abandoned by his parents. I think I will name you Tatsumi, the old man spoke, as he saw the baby close his eyes, going back to sleep while he was still carrying the baby. 4 years later, Tatsumi is living his life just like any other child, going outside playing just like a regular 4-year-old child, despite both him and his grandfather living in a poor village. However, during Tatsumi's childhood, he noticed that he wasn't like the other children. For starters, he was much stronger than the other kids, and even some of the adults. That when he and his grandfather were playfully arm wrestling, he hit his hand again he hit his grandfather's hand against the table so hard and fast that he broke both his grandfather's hand and the table. He also noticed that he could see things really far away with accurate detail, and was somehow able to sense things coming at him, like when a kid threw a ball at him from behind and barely moved out of the way. But despite that, he lived a pretty normal life in the village with his grandfather. However, when Tatsumi was 9, a couple of weeks later, he went to do some exploring in a forest close to the village, not going too deep to avoid dangerous animals, until a shock went through his mind, and suddenly memories of his life as the heroic spirit Emiya and of his life as Shiro Emiya started to pour in his mind. The memories were flooding in his mind were so much that it made Tatsumi crouch down to his knees, screaming in agony, holding his head while his hands with his hands until he eventually passed out. About an hour later, he woke up, up to his feet, breathing slowly and heavily, recollecting himself, trying to process what he just remembered. It took a while, but he finally got all his memories about Shiro and the counter guardian Emiya. Tatsumi thought some more about why he wasn't a counter guardian anymore, and came to the conclusion that the Holy Grail affected his soul to the point of somehow releasing his contract with the world, and also heard his call of wanting to start over. Tatsumi also checked to see if he still had his mana and his magic circuits, which he did, but noticed that he had a lot more mana inside him. That the best way to quantify it would be to say Tatsumi had the magical energy worth of 10,000 elite mages. I'm free. I'm free. I'm free, Tatsumi said joyously expressing what his joyous expression. It was getting late, so Tatsumi ran back home with the biggest smile on his face, as he couldn't wait for tomorrow to test his abilities. The next day rolled around and Tatsumi was up earlier than the usual time. But before he wanted to test his skills, he decided to make some breakfast, which involved some bread, fruit, scrambled eggs, and some small meat he had to manage with. His grandfather then walked in, smelling something delicious, and was quite impressed with Tatsumi, jokingly saying he should be able to get a job in the capital as an elite chef. They both laughed and finished their breakfast. Tatsumi then went back to the forest to see if he can use his skills from his past life. Tatsumi first projected two of his swords, Konsho and Bakuya. Trace on, Tatsumi said. Then immediately a neon bluish green light appeared from his hands, taking the form of both swords, one in each hand. Tatsumi grinned in satisfaction, then started projecting more weapons, putting more mana into each of them, making them a lot better than they originally were. However, as Tatsumi finished creating his sixth weapon, he realized he was more tired than he thought. I guess it was to be expected. His body wasn't yet used to the amount of mana he was producing, Tatsumi thought to himself. Tatsumi later went deeper into the forest, looking for small animals to hunt and also practice his archery skills, which he was quite successful which he was quite successful in. He caught rabbits, boars, and a few ducks flying in the air. However, he was still pretty deep in the forest. He also came across a boar with large horn and was almost as tall as a grown man. Instead of using his bow, he decided to fight the boar head-on to practice his close combat skills. Tatsumi projected both his dual swords and charged the boar head-on, being able to leave some cuts on the boar, but weren't deep enough, as a 9-year-old Tatsumi wasn't strong enough to leave any significant damage. The boar then charged at Tatsumi at full speed, which Tatsumi then used this opportunity to dodge the boar's charge by a hair, giving him the chance to stab the boar by the neck, making it fall over, but Tatsumi finishing it by stabbing his second sword in its neck until the boar died. The sword, but I can't really sharpen my skills if I don't have human opponents, thought Tatsumi. He then carried all the wild animals in a bag that he caught in order to give the rest to the residents in the village, to which everyone was both thankful and impressed to see this 9-year-old kid and so many animals on his own. Tatsumi's heart was filled with joy seeing the villagers' smiling faces. Then when he went back home to tell his grandfather that he was going to become a soldier in the capital, then rise up the ranks, so both him and his grandfather and the villagers could live comfortably, he was so happy that his grandson's accomplishment that they decided to celebrate with all you can eat meat dinner. As years would pass by, Tatsumi would spend most of his days projecting more weapons and tools that were just as, if not better, than the original, depending how much mana he put in them. Tatsumi would then meet a swordman, which the swordman would train and mostly spar with him in both sword and hand-to-hand combat. Tatsumi would also occasionally stop bandits using his bow and different kinds of sword arrows. Tatsumi is now 16 years old, wearing a red overcoat, a black sweater, black pants and boots, while carrying a sword at his back, getting ready to leave the village with his two friends Sayo and Liesu. Sayo being a pretty girl with long black hair, carrying a bow and arrow, and Liesu being a boy the same age, having dark brown hair, wearing a white martial arts headband. The three were standing outside the entrance, with all the villagers gathering to send them off. As they were about to leave the village chief gave Tatsumi a wooden statue, telling him not to sell it, and they would wish them good luck. The trio left and started walking. They were on the move for a couple of days until finally they were only 1 hour away, with Sayo and Liesu being way ahead of him as they were more eager to get to the capital as soon as possible. As Tatsumi was walking, a horde of danger beasts came out of nowhere, wanting to attack the civilians on the road. Tatsumi got out his bow and was able to fire hundreds of shots at the danger beast, so not to make the bows explosive, as it could get pretty messy. Tatsumi finished this in 1 minute and turned to see his friends weren't near him, thinking they probably went inside the capital, not paying too much attention to it. Tatsumi walked in the capital. As if he was being honest with himself. He couldn't really say he was impressed, as he's seen thousands of places like this as his time as a counter guardian. But he had to admit, it did look peaceful. Tatsumi did some exploring around the capital to find some information to join the capital's military force, which led him to meeting Leone. He was able to convince Tatsumi to give her most of his money in order to pay a fee for joining the military. However, Tatsumi was suspicious and actually gave her a bag of projected coins that would eventually disappear in the next 30 minutes if she didn't come back to him during a certain time. And of course, she never came. It was nighttime, and Tatsumi was walking down the street, thinking of where to find the cheapest hotel to stay, until a carriage stopped beside him, with a door opening revealing a blonde-haired girl in a black and blue dress. Her name was Aria. She asked Tatsumi what he was doing, so he responded that he was looking for a place to stay, to which Aria responded with, "Why don't you stay with me, and be part of my bodyguards? Unless that sword is just for show." Tatsumi thought about it, and it was odd for a wealthy girl to go up to a stranger and invite them to stay with her. But he agreed because he didn't want to spend most of his money. And if they did try to do anything, he knew he can take out all of her soldiers with some little tricks up his sleeve. They arrived at the mansion where Tatsumi was introduced to both Arya's parents and then given his room. On the surface, Arya and her parents looked like good people, however, Tatsumi couldn't shake the bad feeling he had about this house. It was the next day, and Arya was in the capital buying gifts and presents for herself, with Tatsumi and her soldiers guarding her presents. The capital looked like a lovely place to live, Tatsumi said, with one of the guards, which then led to a conversation on how this kingdom is run by corruption, and the minister is really in charge of the kingdom, not the emperor. Tatsumi was angry at this, but didn't show it, realizing that the minister is one who raised taxes in his village, that brought it to the poor state it now was. But it was alright, cause once he was able to rise the ranks and earn enough money, he won't need to worry about high tax in the village. It was nightfall. As Tatsumi was back at the mansion in his room sleeping, he heard the noise of steel cutting through flesh, and then rushed out his room into the hallway to see Arya's mother had been cut in half. He then looked outside the window to see 5 people standing on strings of steel wire. He knew this was Night Raid, an assassin group that was infamous around the capital. However, his priority was to find Arya and make sure she was safe, which led him to find her outside near a storage house, where she was planning to hide in. And suddenly, one of Night Raid's members, named Akame, appeared before them, planning to kill Arya, but Tatsumi was blocking every one of Akame's attacks with little ease. "Move, you're not the target," Akame said, which Tatsumi refused, and then led to them getting into a sword fight, with Tatsumi using his long sword against Akame, which he was doing way better to her against her than in canon. That he could end the fight here and now, until he heard of a familiar voice. "Hey you!" Leone shouted, causing both Tatsumi and Akame to stop fighting. "Little bastard, do you know how embarrassing it was to get kicked out of the bar after having the money I had disappear when I was just about to pay?" Leone exclaimed. "Huh, serves you right for stealing other people's money," Tatsumi said with a smirk. Leone then calmed down and told Tatsumi that he shouldn't work for the capital that is filled with corrupt power-hungry maniacs, that the reason they were tasked to kill Arya and her family was because they were abducting people in order to drug and torture and kill them. Arya tried to lie her way out of it, saying she was never involved with these kills, but the truth was later revealed when Leone opened the door to the storehouse, for Tatsumi to see in horror both his friends were beaten, bruised, bloodied up, with Sayo being hung by the arms, dead, and Ieyasu barely able to speak, telling Tatsumi she was the one who led them here, and she is the one who killed Sayo. After hearing this, Arya revealed her true colors, that she did torture and kill them. She didn't say ranting on, saying that she didn't deserve to have such nice hair. As Tatsumi heard this, he immediately used his longsword to slice the head of the girl clean off before she can even finish her rant. Thank you, Tatsumi, Ieyasu said before dying seconds later. Leone was quite impressed by this and asked Tatsumi to join Night Raid. He was reluctant at first, but he didn't want to because he didn't want to start killing people again. But as he thought to himself, if he was able to kill the minister, his village wouldn't have to pay his high taxes, and maybe he would be able to get some money from the capital to live a better life. Tatsumi then agreed to join and followed them to their base, which was located in the mountains. From then on, Tatsumi's journey as a member of Night Raid begins. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Later.